A bronze trumpet rises above a line of shields. Its tube is taller than a man. At the top, hammered metal forms the head of a wild animal, jaws open, ears raised. When the musician blows, the sound rolls across the field like an animal calling from somewhere beyond the trees. Roman soldiers remembered that sound. They wrote of horns, shouting, rattling chariots, painted shields, and warriors wearing gold at their throats. Greek sculptors carved defeated Galatians with thick hair and heavy talks. Centuries later, these fragments were gathered into a familiar picture: the Celt as a fierce tribesman standing at the edge of civilization. The people themselves left a more complicated trail. There was no Celtic empire and no nation whose inhabitants all called themselves Celts. The word came from Greek and Roman observers who grouped together peoples spread across much of Iron Age Europe. Their languages were related, their artists shared patterns, their elites traded, married, competed, and copied one another. Yet an inhabitant of Gaul might identify with the Arverni, Aedui, or Sequani. A Briton might belong to the Iceni or Durotriges. Far to the east, Celtic-speaking settlers established kingdoms in Anatolia and became known as the Galatians. Their world began to take recognizable form north of the Alps during the early Iron Age. Deep beneath the mountains near Hallstatt, miners cut salt from pale rock by lamplight. Timber stairways descended into galleries where the cold preserved leather, cloth, wooden tools, and even the bodies of the dead. Salt kept meat through winter and made livestock easier to sustain. It could be packed onto animals and carried along river valleys toward distant settlements. Around this trade grew powerful households. Their dead were placed beneath burial mounds with wagons, weapons, bronze vessels, jewelry, and imported goods from the Mediterranean. Greek pottery and Etruscan metalwork traveled north. Amber, salt, iron, hides, and enslaved people moved south. At fortified hilltops, such as the Huneberg beside the Danube, mud brick walls were built in a style borrowed from the Mediterranean, overlooking houses, workshops, roads, and crowded outer settlements. These communities understood the world beyond the forest. They drank imported wine, employed specialist metalworkers, and used elaborate burials to display rank. Authority rested on land, cattle, armed followers, family alliances, and control of trade routes. A noble household could rise quickly. It could disappear just as quickly when rivals redirected wealth elsewhere. By the 5th century before Christ, a new artistic language appeared around places such as La Tène, on the shore of Lake Neuchâtel in Switzerland. Iron swords, scabbards, brooches, helmets, and ornaments were decorated with curling plants, staring faces, birds, beasts, and forms that seem to change as the eye follows them. Greek leaves became something stranger in Celtic hands. Human faces emerged from vines. Animals dissolved into spirals. Symmetry bent without collapsing. This art traveled with warriors, merchants, and craftsmen. Celtic-speaking groups crossed the Alps into northern Italy. Others moved down the Danube. In 390 before Christ, according to Roman tradition, Gauls defeated a Roman army and entered the city itself. A century later, Celtic forces pushed into Greece. Some continued into Anatolia, where their descendants preserved Celtic speech for generations among Greek cities and eastern kingdoms. Expansion rarely meant a single migrating people replacing everyone before them. Warbands seized land, families followed, local communities adopted foreign weapons, ornaments, and customs. Marriage tied newcomers to older populations. The archaeological remains show movement, imitation, violence, and exchange occurring together. Most people lived far from royal graves and famous battles. They cleared fields, repaired fences, ground grain, tended pigs and cattle, spun wool, and stored food against poor harvests. Their settlements ranged from scattered farmsteads to large fortified towns known as oppida. At places such as Manching in Bavaria and Bibracte in Gaul, craftsmen minted coins, worked iron, produced glass ornaments, and traded across regions measured in hundreds of miles. Religion occupied springs, rivers, groves, and boundaries. Weapons were bent and lowered into water. Cauldrons, jewelry, animals, and sometimes human remains were deposited in places set apart from ordinary life. Priests, whom Roman writers called druids, preserved teachings without writing them down in the Roman fashion. Almost everything said about them comes from outsiders, often conquerors with reasons to portray native customs as exotic or savage. Rome eventually absorbed most of this world. Julius Caesar's conquest of Gaul killed and enslaved enormous numbers of people. Britain was invaded under Claudius a century later. Roads, forts, taxes, cities, and Roman law changed daily life, though local languages and gods continued beneath Latin names. Beyond the frontiers, Celtic speech survived longer. In Ireland, beyond direct Roman rule, it developed a rich written tradition after the arrival of Christianity. From Ireland, Wales, Scotland, Cornwall, Brittany, and the Isle of Man came many of the languages and legends now most strongly associated with Celtic identity. Modern archaeology keeps loosening the old picture of anonymous tribes and wandering warriors. In 2024, researchers studying DNA and isotopes from elite Hallstatt burials in southern Germany found biological relatives buried in rich mounds as far as 100 kilometers apart. Two exceptionally wealthy men were probably uncle and nephew through the maternal line. The evidence suggests that some early Celtic ruling families formed regional dynasties in which status could pass through powerful female connections. A 2025 Nature study examined 57 genomes from Duratrigian cemeteries in southern Britain. Many of the buried people belonged to one extended maternal lineage, while unrelated newcomers were mostly men. In these communities, women appear to have remained near their ancestral homes, while husbands arrived from elsewhere. Roman accounts of unusually prominent British women now sit beside physical evidence of social networks built around mothers, daughters, and sisters. Then, in 2025, archaeologists excavating ahead of construction in Norfolk lifted an entire block of earth containing an extraordinary military hoard. Conservation work announced in 2026 revealed a nearly complete carnyx, parts of another trumpet, 5 shield bosses, and a bronze boar-headed standard. The objects had been repaired and used before they were buried in the territory associated with the Iceni, perhaps during the troubled decades surrounding Rome's conquest. The trumpet is silent now. Its bronze walls are thin, cracked, and green with age. Conservators support each fragment, while scanners reveal what remains hidden inside the soil. Yet its shape still preserves the intention of the craftsman who made it. A long animal-headed instrument held above the crowd, visible through dust and movement, sounding across a field where families, rival chiefs, Roman armies, and the future of an old European world had come together.